I think what's going to happen, as happens with a lot of things, people will play around with it this way and that way for a while, and then they'll get tired of it and they'll lose it. You say the whole society is going this way. I say, yes, and look at the society. We are in a cultural deadlock. We have several generations without the public surfacing of poetry. We have an art that is sheer decoration, if not outright camp and Dada. It's an anti-art movement. We have very little that anyone can make could be preserved, could be a link to the past and a hope for the future.
James Stanley Brakhage was born on January 14, 1933. He was better known in the film world as Stan Brakhage. He was an American non-narrative filmmaker and is considered to be one of the most influential avant-garde filmmakers of the 20th century. In 1952, at the age of 19, he dropped out of Dartmouth College to pursue filmmaking. During this time, he completed his first film, Interim. The following year, Brakhage moved to San Francisco to attend the San Francisco School of the Arts, where he found a more pleasing atmosphere and creative influence. He became friends with poets Robert Duncan and Kenneth Rexroth. However, in 1954, he decided to drop out of school and tried his luck in New York City.
Skyliner takes off for New York, wonder city of the world. People from everywhere get a bird's eye view of the scenic splendors of America. The historic East is only a few hours away by air. Above the clouds, there is ever-changing scenery. And what a view of the famous New York skyline. The wheels are lowered, and you let down onto the runway at LaGuardia Airport.
Sorry folks. Anyway. During this time, he became acquainted with other avant-garde filmmakers such as Mary Menken, Willard Moss, Jonas Mekas, Kenneth Anger, and including the mother of avant-garde filmmaking herself, Maya Deren. And was greatly influenced by her boosting his works to a higher degree.
I think what makes Brakhage different and what made him so significant for the avant-garde filmmaking was that he really made this change where there was, in Brakhage's films, there was almost no story, there was no character, there was no protagonist. His films really became about a way of seeing, and that way of seeing had to do with he talked about it as a pre-linguistic, before words. His most famous line is, one of his most famous lines is, how many shades of green would a baby see crawling through the grass before they have language? So trying to see the world without words, just as pure vision, and trying to access that idea of pure vision. And he would do things to the camera and to the to sort of change the way the camera would just mechanically reproduce the world. He would spit on the lens, or he would take the film itself and scratch it or paint it, so that just the automatic it wasn't just an automatic recording device. It was something that was being manipulated. One of his most famous films doesn't even use a camera at all. He literally took apart a moth and grass and flowers and stuck it all to this clear leader and re-photographed it and put that through the camera, sort of pushing the bounds of what we conceive of as film and what a film could be, what other things you can look at. And just to throw a personal note in there, I mean, the reason I show Brakhage in Film 1 is because I remember being in Film 1 and seeing moth light, and seeing window water baby moving, and I had no idea that a film could be something else. For me, I took film as an extra credit class, and I saw these films and it just broke open what I thought a film could be, and it really moved me. I found those films so moving, and I felt like they had an emotional quality that wasn't captured by other kinds of narrative. The other thing that I'll say is, if you look at Brakhage's films, if you stop on any individual frame, the individual frames themselves are so beautiful that they could be, if you took that and considered a painting at full scale, it would work as a painting on full scale. If you stop any of the frames of that Dog Star Man film, each one of those frames is beautifully, beautifully composed. Okay, so this is an optical printer, and this is a device that Brakhage may have used to make something like moth light, where he basically put the moth between two pieces of film and then re-photographed. And what this is basically a camera married to a projector. So on this side you have basically a film projector, and that you can run the film through. And on this side you have a camera that you're basically pushing those two things right up against each other, and you're projecting right into the camera lens. Okay, so I think something that's lost, if you haven't, when you're watching a Brakhage film, if you haven't ever actually played with film, is to realize how physical the films are. To represent different things. Like, he has a character in one of his films that's blind, and he scratched out the eyes, and every film has his name scratched in it by Brakhage, and that meant literally scratching off the emulsion, manipulating the image that way. And so the other thing that he would do is just literally paint on the film, paint on clear leader, or paint on images themselves, and really change the image through painting. And this painting wasn't, there had been tinting and that kind of color in early films, but this was something more akin to fine art painting, but with that time element in it. Using things like film take-up reels, film counters, these things that, we don't have, very less and less people have experience with, are ways that, he would have been working. And so it has, film in this case is more sculptural, in just the way that it's made, and that physicality really impacts the content of the film. It's a really different process than doing something on a computer.
I need the movies for that ritual that they give. I mean, when I go to the movies, I go for the same reasons I did when I was a child, really. I go for the assurance of the ritual, and I want the Western to be the same ritual, essentially, as it was when I was a child. In a way, I said at one point, like, I got so tired of being called an imaginative filmmaker, or imagination or fantasy. People kept throwing at me, and I finally said, no, I'm the most specific documentary filmmaker that can be, because I document the way in which I see, which includes my imagination, or those pictures that I throw up against, those pictures that I throw back while I'm gathering light and seeing. I deal with my memory, or with my the closed eyes, with the optic nerve endings, and with the inpouring of the light all at once, which is like trying to be get the most of what the actual act of seeing is to myself. Now, I don't know how you can be any more specifically a documenter than that. Whereas documentary filmmaking, as it's normally used, means in stills or film, means accepting Renaissance perspective implicitly as the way of seeing,